if we live or not. It's actually hard to tell when exactly the live stream starts. It's a bit odd in the app. Let me check it on the website, YouTube Studio. It says excellent connection. I think, yeah, now I'm pretty sure now I'm live because I can hear myself through another device. Probably the best way of testing that everything works. Stream health, excellent. And share it on, we normally do Twitter. And run away. Also want to do LinkedIn. They join me live. Then later I normally change the name. We can close it. I don't know how to share on Facebook. It was giving me errors. So I would not. So making this ECG game the last week or so. One sec. Still want to check my sound again through the phone. But checking that I'm using the right microphone sometimes. To keep checking my OBS. This going through NVIDIA broadcast, and sometimes NVIDIA broadcast will just stop working. So, not great. Yeah, I already made videos on it in the past. I have to do some more. They had some updates, but it doesn't seem like there was much improvement. So we made some advancement. We have a Python script version running as well. It's actually better and worse. It has some things are working better, some things not so much. I think overall, yeah. Now I have this jumpy bit that we are trying to resolve. Yeah, we don't have that maximum speed yet. Want to limit the speed at 10. I'm not doing it yet. Mainly the drawing on the canvas. So when suddenly changes when the new selected segment is selected the waveform. Waveform is selected, and we already popped it into GPT, and it suggesting us to do more debugging, which okay. Actually, we want to do the debugging in Python in the development suite, and not in the browser. So all these bits, console logs, would like to quickly change them into print statements. Instead of using console logs, can we print within the IDE? That's a question. Sorry, that wasn't meant to be part of the prompt, but I was already started talking, so it's okay. Let's read that quickly.
Yes, many integrated development environments, IDEs, offer features for debugging and printing output directly within the IDE itself. Instead of using console.log, you can use the built-in debugging tools and print statements provided by your IDE. This can be very helpful for tracking variables, understanding the flow of your code, and diagnosing issues. Here's how you can achieve this in different popular IDEs. Visual Studio Code, VS Code. Place your cursor on a line where you want to add a breakpoint, usually a line that is part of the code section you want to inspect. Press F9 or click in the left gutter next to the line number to toggle a breakpoint. Start your application with the debugger, usually by pressing F5 or clicking the green play button in the top menu.
How about print statements? Because we want the code running, we just want this selected waveform. Let's say oops, turn this into a print statement. I can't spell. Well, I rather talk to it, but then it's hard when you have to copy paste as well. Wait, I forgot that. Yet we don't want to hold execution, we just want to print to console. So I don't know how to do it. Um, no, we don't want to let. We want to print it to Visual Studio Code. No, we don't want breakpoints. No, we don't want. What? Okay. So yeah, that's one of those things that would have been easy in Python, obviously, but just have to leave with this for now. Right, so the main problem at the moment is that when we have a new waveform selected, when the new selected, what's it, selected waveform? Is it called selected waveform? Um, waveform, it's actually called waveform function. A new waveform function is selected. Pop it back into the chat. See what it says. Normally try this in BARD as well. Yeah, normally when studying to write a lot of things, consistency of the drawing. There's no CSS, external dependencies, print by different waveform functions. Skincare. Okay, no, we are doing this. Yeah, we do have to check that. Tagging and scrolling. I want to keep this rolling because tagging works okay. Did just restart when I no beware. Right, yeah, so when yeah, when it's jumping, uh, so we want make sure, where am I writing? Make sure the current waveform completes showing and then roll in the next one. See if it picks up on the comments at the end. And yes, it does.
On your additional comment, it seems like you want to ensure that the current waveform segment completes showing before transitioning to the next one. To achieve this, you can implement a mechanism that delays the addition of the new waveform segment until the current segment is fully displayed. Here's how you can modify the code to achieve this.
Um, yes, we have this array of randomly selected segments.
We introduce the adding new segment flag to track whether a new segment is currently being added. We also use the segment addition timer to control the delay between adding new segments. When the timer is active, the game loop continues to draw the current waveform segment without adding a new one. Once the timer expires, a new segment is added, and the flag is reset. This approach should help ensure that the current waveform segment completes showing before the next one is added, which should result in a smoother transition between segments. Adjust the delay time as needed to achieve the desired effect.
Don't necessarily need a delay, like an extra delay. Let's see. Yeah, the delay is a bit weird. Um, should be a simpler. Is there a simpler solution without any adding of additional code?
Looking for a simpler solution without adding additional code for delaying segment addition, you can modify the game loop logic to ensure that a new waveform segment is only added when the current segment is fully displayed. Here's how you can achieve this by modifying the existing code. JavaScript. Simplified solution, the new waveform segment is added only when near end is false, which means that the current segment is fully displayed. This approach avoids introducing additional timers or flags and relies on the natural progression of the game loop to ensure smooth transitions between segments.
This sounds interesting. More than happy to try that. And we don't see any waveforms at all. Control 5. No, that's fine. No waveforms are displayed. And we have this prompts that we place all the old prompts into. We just pop it in there.
Upon reviewing your code, it seems like the issue might be related to the generation of waveform data and their display. Let's go through your code to identify and resolve the issue. Check data generation. Ensure that the t-values in waveform functions like QRS variation 1, QRS variation 2, etc. are properly defined with E that the canvas dimensions, width and height, are set correctly and that they match the size you want to display. Check score display. Make sure that the score display is rendering correctly. Uncomment the score display code if you've previously commented it out. Check tagged waveforms. Confirm that the logic for tagging displaying tagged waveforms is working as expected. Check scroll speed calculation. Verify that the scroll speed calculation logic in the update scroll speed function is working as intended. Check initialization. Double check that the initialization of the game loop and canvas is correct. There should not be any errors or missing elements.
Only maybe the last one could be a problem. Let's regenerate. No waveforms are displayed after. This is happening after changing. Oh, come on. It's just essentially regenerating. Let's say regenerating.
Seems that the change I suggested caused the issue with no waveforms being displayed. Let's address this issue. You can revert the change to add new segments and instead introduce a condition to make sure you're not adding too many segments at once. Here's how you can modify the game loop function to address this issue.
Yeah, so the segments are not synchronized. Like the adding of new segments is not synchronized with when um, the segment is actually needed. So why the whole code will not fit on screen. There's something I can do with view. No, I assume that it is the same because there are no comments. Let double check. This bit is different, and the rest is the same.
In this modified code, we're checking the length of the waveform array against the max underscore waveform underscore length before adding a new segment. This prevents the array from growing excessively and potentially causing issues with rendering. The condition waveform.length max underscore waveform underscore length ensures that you don't add too many segments. Please replace the previous game loop function with this updated version and test it to ensure that waveforms are displayed correctly and the issue is resolved.
No, there's still no waveforms.
It seems like there might be an issue in how the segments are being rendered or added to the waveform. To address this, let's simplify the code and ensure that each segment is displayed properly. Here's a revised version of the game loop function that should work more reliably.
So the move to the next waveform segment. I assume I don't need this one. Set the canvas. Oh, come on. What? So this doesn't check for a near end. Does it? No, it doesn't.
In this version, we are iterating only over the displayed waveform length segments to ensure that each segment is properly displayed within the canvas. Additionally, we ensure that the waveform index wraps around when it exceeds the length of the waveform array.
Yes, potentially we don't need that. Don't need this. And the drawing. Drawing is different. Just pop the last main game. There's still no waveforms display.
See that the code you provided is similar to the previous version with the adjusted game loop function. However, it seems like the issue still persists. To further assist you, I need more context about how the t-values array and waveform generation functions, generate full waveform, QRS variation 1, QRS variation 2, etc., are defined in your code. The issue could potentially be related to how the waveform data is being generated or if there are any changes in other parts of the code. From the code you've shared, everything seems correct in terms of waveform generation and the usage of functions to generate various types of waveforms. Given the provided code, the logic in game_logic.js appears correct as well. However, since I don't see the rest of your application setup, example, HTML structure, how the JavaScript files are linked, etc., I can't definitively identify this. HTML structure you provided seems to be minimal, and you've commented out the canvas element and the score display. Since I can't see any specific issues in the code you've shared so far, let's make sure that everything is set up correctly to display the waveform on the canvas. Here's what you can do to troubleshoot and ensure the canvas and game logic are set up properly. Uncomment the canvas element and the score display in your HTML. HTML. Your canvas has a defined size using CSS or attributes. Your game_logic.js file, update the line where you get the canvas context to use the correct ID.
Okay, we'll need a CSS.
Since you're not showing any score display element, you can comment out or remove the following lines related to the score display.
Do want to show the score like this. That was good.
Make sure that your canvas is styled properly and displayed on the page. Once you've made these changes, try running your application again and see if the waveform is displayed on the canvas. Remember that troubleshooting might require a bit of trial and error. If the waveform still doesn't display correctly, carefully review your code for any inconsistencies, errors, or missing parts. You can also consider using browser developer tools to inspect elements and check for errors in the console. If you encounter any specific error messages or unexpected behavior, please provide that information so I can.
It stuffed up my code.
Understand that you're still facing an issue where no waveforms are being displayed. Given that the code appears to be correct, the issue might be related to the interaction between your different JavaScript files and their loading order. To ensure that everything is set up correctly, here are a few steps to follow. Make sure that your HTML file, index.html, is loading the JavaScript files in the correct order. The waveforms.js file, containing waveform data, should be loaded before the game_logic.js file. In your provided HTML, it seems that this. If you are running your code locally, using file:/URLs, browsers might have security restrictions that prevent certain features, including loading external files via AJAX. It's usually better to run your code through a local development server or deploy it to a web server. Verify in your browser's network tab that the JavaScript files are loading correctly and are not encountering any errors. The network tab can provide insight into whether the files are being fetched and executed. Check for typos and errors. Ensure that the functions and variables referenced in the code are correctly named and defined. Typos can easily cause unexpected behavior. Disable cache. Sometimes, browser caching can cause old versions of your scripts to be used. To rule out this possibility, try disabling the cache in your browser's developer tools while testing. Test in different browsers. Sometimes, issues can be specific to a particular browser. Try running your code in different browsers to see if the problem persists across all of them. Simplify code. If none of the above steps help, consider temporarily simplifying your code to the minimum required to display a waveform. Gradually add back features and functionality while testing after each edition. If you've tried these steps and are still facing issues, please provide any specific error message.
Yeah, we do want to simplify this code.
Let's start by simplifying the code to its basic structure, focusing only on displaying a waveform on the canvas. We'll remove unnecessary components and functions, and then gradually add them back in to identify where the issue might be occurring. Here's a simplified version of the game_logic.js file that only displays a waveform. This simplified version, we're directly generating a sine wave and drawing it on the canvas. The waveform is a basic sine wave that goes up and down. The game loop function continuously redraws the waveform on the canvas using the request animation frame method. Before proceeding, please confirm whether the simplified version displays the waveform correctly. If it does, we can gradually reintroduce additional features, such as interaction and abnormal waveforms, while testing after each.
It does display the waveform correctly. This is a really nice troubleshooting.
The simplified version displays the waveform correctly. Let's start gradually adding back the features from your original code while testing after each edition. This will help us identify where the issue might be occurring. Let's begin by adding back the user input handling for tagging waveforms. Here's the modified code with user input handling. Please add this modified code to your game_logic.js file and test if the user input handling works as expected without any issues. If this works correctly, you can continue adding the additional components and functions from your original code while testing after each.
It does work correctly.
Since the user input handling is working as expected, you can now start gradually adding back the other components and functions from your original code. After each addition, make sure to test the functionality to ensure that everything is working correctly. You can start by adding back the waveform generation and drawing logic, and then proceed to reintegrate the rest of the game components and features. Remember to test thoroughly at each step to identify if any issues arise. This incremental approach will help you pinpoint the specific part of the code that might be causing the problem you initially faced. If you encounter any issues,
Okay, can you continue adding the code back?
can continue adding back the code gradually. Let's start by adding the waveform generation and drawing logic. Here's the part of the code where you can add those back. Add this code back and make sure that the waveform is being displayed correctly. Once you confirm that the waveform is being displayed as expected, you can gradually add back the other components and features of the game. Test after each addition to ensure that everything continues to work as intended. Regenerate. Free research preview. ChatGPT may produce inaccurate information about
Can I have the same trouble? It's keeping dripping some code. I don't know if it's a good strategy to regenerate the code. And we can pop, oops. Adjusting, popping it in there. Can keep generating. Whoops. Keep adding more of the original code. Would like the whole thing to actually execute. Okay. Not okay, but execute okay. Stuffing up my sentences, but the way missing some of the original code. Um, okay, it doesn't want to do it. It wants me to do it. Hi Ryan, how you going? The chance that GPT became worse in generating Python code. Making the same thing with bot, but it's also doing all sorts of funny business. And now my thing doesn't execute. I'm not sure if it should go bottom up. Adding original code was modified. I should have the original. Should just fetch it from GitHub. I don't have a copy of it. Need something working. Get into the Python script. So we have this Scadio Quest Python script that should just work. Yeah, there's some bug with this. I thought I solved it yesterday, but new version of GPT is worse at logic than the previous. Yeah, we're getting it to the math problems. Math problems to see the difference. It works for me. Yeah, it's working okay when you keeping it under like 10 prompts or so. Close this for now. Essentially the original prompts to generate the code. Ah, yeah, moved away from Flask. I don't think I need it yet. Because I can do everything in JavaScript, I think. Then I had more prompts, and then it's when it started becoming hairy. Also trying to split the chest also seems like it's having trouble once the code is above like 150 lines. It's having real trouble keeping track of everything. And let's just go back quickly until we have something working. Back to, we have the score displayed, okay. have errors. This bit was still not working. Still errors. Do I need to clear cache or something? No, we don't have that icon. That's okay. That's right to revert to a working code. We can right. It was generating when it's generating stuff. It's telling me to. It's essentially forgetting things and telling me to remove uh, things that were already there. Right. So we had that near end. So checking when the waveform. Okay, I would have expected it to. We also changed the because it told me to change the HTML, which I didn't need to. Right, so the waveform is back. Okay, that's the last. So it was. So it's good in the sense that it started telling me to troubleshoot by removing bits, but then it was adding bits back as that was good, but then it just stopped and told me, oh, do the rest yourself, um, which was really odd. I don't know if it's continuing. Right, so for normal waveform, we should get points down. Then we have abnormal waveforms. We should have them back up. Okay, it doesn't work again. And we have the jumpy bit when a new waveform is coming. It's yes. Quickly check the score. -10 in the score works, but yeah, we're having trouble with this waveform index. Well, yeah, we had better version than that as well, but all right. So now it's actually giving more points. Once you get to 50 points, it should also run faster for every 50 points. So that's working okay. For normal, it should start reducing points because that's the one you shouldn't be marking. Go for the Python code. We want to add this instruction on the canvas somewhere. Uh, we want to add instructions text. Yes, we still have that problem where the drawing changes when the new waveform is new waveform function is selected. No, added. Make sure the current waveform completes showing. Yes, we want to do that. We start a new chest. That's the thing about it, is it will forget context and will never tell you what it's why yeah, it tells everybody tell me, well done. GPT is a
It
great
looks like you need to
job.
track more of the original code. Great job. Based on the code you provided, everything seems to be in place. If you're encountering issues or seeing unexpected behavior, I'd recommend going through the code carefully and checking for any syntax errors, variable scope issues, or logical errors. Regarding the comment you've added about the drawing on the canvas changing suddenly when a new waveform function is added, it might be related to how you're handling the rendering of the waveforms. One approach to ensure a smooth transition between waveform segments is to gradually blend the new waveform segment into the current one, instead of abruptly switching. This can be done by interpolating between the current waveform and the new waveform over a few frames. If you're still facing specific issues or have more questions, please provide more details about the behavior you're observing, and
No, let's do the simple task first. We want to add instruction text on the HTML. Okay. I'm surprised how in the game this canvas just works. I mean, the JavaScript is generating it because I don't have anything in the body of the HTML. And yes, I do want to add instructions like that. See where it's placed them. Place them in the beginning. Okay, find abnormal ECG buttons upon clicking on them. Avoid clicking on normal ones. And this should be abnormal. So that's correct. By the way, the color is meant to be changing as well. For correct, and the colors are blinking there. Yes, I want to prevent that. That wasn't happening earlier. It's something to do with the size of the screen and the size of the length of the waveform. Um, I don't know what's that. The it generate two of them or something. Anyway, the logic is mostly okay. Score is increasing okay, except yeah, the jumpy bit. The jumpy bit. So we did this. Added the instructions. The dragon can sound the changes when the new waveform is. So when a new, let's try rephrasing this. So when a new waveform function is um, added um, in um, oh come on, yes, so when we use is added in new function is added in generate new waveform segment function. The current waveform is being replaced make sure the current waveform is showing, and then roll the next one. Let's put back in. I think it's lost context already. I like how it repeats what I said.
It seems like you want to ensure that the current waveform completes showing before a new one is rolled in when the generate new waveform segment function is called. To achieve this, you can modify your code as follows.
Well, I'm always displaying a waveform. Add variable to track whatever the waveform is currently displaying. No. Good try. Next solution.
Looks like your game logic is progressing well. To ensure that the current waveform completes showing before rolling in the next one, you need to make sure that you're generating new waveform segments and adding them to the waveform array at the appropriate time. From your code, it seems like you're already checking for near end to determine if a new segment needs to be added. You can modify the game loop function to add the new segment only when the current waveform is close to the end, as you mentioned.
Why is it like close to the end and not at the end? Actually, you say only when your current waveform is close to the end. Yeah, that sentence is a bit. We do want to modify. Modify the game loop function to add the new segment only when the current waveform is finished. Finished rolling. I don't know, for context to just pop in the whole code back.
To ensure that the current waveform completes showing before a new segment is added, you can modify the game loop function. Specifically, you should add the new segment only when the current waveform is at or near the end of its scrolling cycle. Here's how you can modify the game loop function to achieve this.
Why are we moving straight away? Just restructured. That's interesting. So just the game loop just was changed into a different order. Game loop. Can I just do this? Yes. There are no new waveforms coming. QRS variation 2. Make it scroll faster. Okay, it solved the problem by just scrolling the same waveform over and over again. And no new waveforms coming. This is in line 40. This function even being called. It's returning new waveform and waveform type. Is near end ever. Don't like this logic. It's like, again, why is it near end? Is near end ever reached? The name. Also, why can't we just check for the end of the current waveform instead of near end?
We should actually check for the end of the current waveform, not just its proximity, to ensure that a new segment is added when the current waveform completes its cycle. Here's the corrected version of the game loop function.
It's very light on like on changing my whole code uh, and making errors. So the order should be correct, right? So this is the main game loop. We're clearing the canvas, I think. Moving to the next waveform 7, I don't know why. But okay, we need to do it anyway because that's running in the loop. Right, we're resetting the canvas, drawing the waveform, updating the display score, checking if the current waveform is about to complete. Yeah, that bit. Draw. Update the display score. Check if the current waveform has completed showing. to generate another normal. Why can't I click on that? Right, no P wave score going up. Right, generating 2 in a row. Okay, 3 in a row. Why? 4 in a row. Yeah, the speed is not being taken into account. Then we have a normal one. And the screen is still right. This is the normal one, then the score will be going down. Yes, it does. There's still something very wrong.
Now, we are checking if the current waveform has completed showing by comparing waveform index plus displayed waveform length with waveform.length. If this condition is met, we add a new segment, ensuring a smooth transition between segments and preventing segments from being cut off prematurely.
Generate like 2 waveforms in the beginning. Can we generate more than one waveform to begin with?
Yes, you can definitely generate more than one waveform to begin with. This can add variety to the initial gameplay and create a more engaging experience for the player. To achieve this, you can modify the generate new waveform segment function to generate a batch of new waveforms instead of just one.
Now let's regenerate this.
You can generate more than one waveform to begin with in order to provide a variety of segments for the player to interact with. Here's how you can modify the generate initial waveforms function to generate multiple initial waveforms.
In the game loop.
In this example, we've added a loop to generate multiple new waveforms when the current waveform is about to complete showing. You can adjust the number new waveforms variable to control how many new waveforms are generated in each iteration of the game loop. This can add more complexity and variation to the gameplay.
Is that near end still there? I want to get rid of that near end. Wait, it's not there already, is it? Near. We're not actually using it, which is good. That's the same blue, green, red. Check if the current waveform has completed showing. Check if the current has completed showing. Generate multiple new waveforms. Where to? That seemed to be okay. How many functions? Update scroll speed, game loop. No, I don't like that. Number of waveforms. What's the current waveform coming from? Like the original one. Okay, let's try it out. Right, so we have normal and no S wave. I don't know which one's S wave, but it should be something missing. Yeah, so this should. Oh, I can check it. No B wave. So I'm checking it in Chrome as well. Showing in the normal one again. Uh, don't think this thing works. So if the waveform index plus display. Get rid of that for a sec. URS variation 2 and no P wave. This index is too large. V wave and the normal one. So display it one after another. Score looks okay. Right now should be getting 2 more. Um, this condition is not reached often enough. Yes, so this bit waveform index. Yeah, don't get that.
The condition waveform index plus displayed waveform length equals waveform.length is not being reached often enough. It could be due to the scroll speed and the length of the displayed waveform. If the scroll speed is too fast or the displayed waveform length is relatively large, it might take a while for the waveform to reach the end and trigger the generation of new waveforms. To address this, you can adjust the scroll speed and the displayed waveform length to make sure that the condition is met more frequently. Here are a couple of approaches you could consider. Adjust scroll speed. You can reduce the length of the displayed waveform on the canvas. This will effectively
Let's get back to the original one. And yeah, this is a good idea.
reduce displayed waveform length. You can reduce the length of the displayed waveform on the canvas. This will effectively make the displayed waveform shorter, making it more likely to reach the end within a shorter period of time. Remember that the balance between scroll speed, displayed waveform length, and the rate of generating new waveforms will impact the overall gameplay experience.
There should be, when it's finished, there should be 2 waveforms generated. I think it's now 2 normal ones. Yeah, the score goes down. Yeah, so this bit here, math floor with t-values length, t-values length. If you divide it by 2, you have no S wave normal. Be kidding. To monitor for waveform length. This condition should happen quicker and more often.
By modifying the condition to if waveform index plus displayed waveform length equals waveform.length, scroll speed, you ensure that the new waveforms are generated before the current waveform has completely scrolled out of view. This
Yeah, that's right. I had it before, like, can't believe, like, I'm troubleshooting stuff that was fixed before, and then it's coming back. So we generate normal and no T wave. So normal should give me -10. Yeah, I'm cheating. I know already it's has no T wave, so we'll not have the last bit there. Know why that is happening. Do I still have the normal -10, no B wave? I should be getting 2 more about now. Yeah, this is not happening in the right time. We have, oh, yeah, we have normal. Normal. Yeah, and then it, oh, come on. Yeah, that's not correct. Is not correct. This is not working well. So I generated 2 waveforms. Once they clear the screen, there should be 2 more generated, and they shouldn't be jumping on top of one another. Right, like this. So when you had the new ones. So yeah, so to check if the current waveform has completed, showing is not the logic of this is not correct. It's this statement that we need the new waveforms are not generated and added to the canvas at the correct time. So generating QRS variation 1, variation 2. Yeah, that's correct. And about now, should be generating 2 more, and it should be just added. Instead, we keep showing the same thing. And all of a sudden it is not showing if the waves are not uh, rolled. Stack smoothly. Meaning it's lost the content, so I'm giving it the whole code back. Also testing it in Chrome on our screen. It does the same thing pretty much. Well, not pretty much, it does the same thing.
Seems I misunderstood the intention of the condition. If the new waveforms are not generated and added to the canvas at the correct time, you can revise the condition to ensure that it is correctly triggered when the current waveform is close to completing its display. Here's the updated code.
Don't trust it. Let's remain the same, set the color is the same, update the display score is the same. Now we have this check. Okay, this is the same. They haven't actually changed anything. Just by changing the label, the comment. Come on. The scroll speed is adjusted automatically. Um, Wait, so what happens? The score is generating a normal one and a no S waveform. Yeah, but now we should generate 2 more and just add them. It's just keeping scrolling the same thing, normal. Uh, when 2 original waveforms stopped scrolling, we should generate 2 more into memory and then add them to the end of the first 2 waveforms. When when the original 2 waveforms about to finish rolling all across the canvas. We generate two more into memory and add them to the end of the first two waveforms so that the scroll is continuous. Let's just put it, assuming it still has all the previous code. Oh crap. Got it.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying. To achieve a continuous scrolling of waveforms, you'll need to ensure that new waveforms are generated and added to the end of the existing waveforms before they finish scrolling across the canvas. Here's the updated code.
To the next waveform, reset the canvas. I don't know why that is needed, but okay. Draw the waveforms. Waveform, that's the same. Update scroll speed is the same. Check. Did this? No, it did change something. Okay, let's see. We generate an OT wave and a normal wave. That's correct so far. Well, now we should generate two more. Oh, come on.
This code should ensure a continuous scrolling of waveforms by generating new waveforms and adding them to the end of the existing ones before they finish scrolling across the canvas. Adjust the scroll speed and other parameters.
Okay, let's assume it doesn't know what changes we have made. Just pop the whole code in. looks the same. Can scroll speed is adjusted automatically, and you haven't actually changed anything. What are the changes made?
The condition for checking if the current waveforms are about to finish scrolling has been modified. The previous condition waveform.length, waveform index, displayed waveform length plus scroll speed is now used to determine if the current waveforms are nearing completion of scrolling.
Yes.
Inside the modified condition, a loop generates new waveforms and appends them to the end of the existing ones. This ensures a continuous and smooth scrolling experience. The variable number new waveforms controls how many new waveforms are generated and added. The main idea.
Yeah, but that's the same code as I had. What on earth are you talking about? Note that scroll speed is adjusted automatically based on the score. Okay, we need to start a new chat. Normally, we have to pop in the other JavaScript code. We pop in the HTML. And then the game logic with the comments at the end. Sometimes hitting stop generating really froze the website.
It looks like you provided a JavaScript code snippet that defines the logic for a game related to ECG waveforms. The code implements the main game loop, handles user input, updates the score, and manages the scrolling and rendering of the ECG waveforms on the canvas. Here's a summary of the key parts of the game_logic.js file. Constants and variables. The code begins by defining various constants such as canvas dimensions and color codes. It also initializes variables for the canvas, context, font, waveform, score, scroll speed, and tag segments. Generate new waveform segment. This function generates a new waveform segment based on normal or abnormal distributions. There's a 60% chance of generating an abnormal segment. User input handling. The code sets up a click event listener on the canvas to handle user interaction. When a user clicks on a waveform segment, the segment's type is determined, normal, abnormal, tagged abnormal, and the score is adjusted accordingly. Scroll speed calculation. The update scroll speed function calculates the scroll speed based on the player's score. The scroll speed increases with the score, but it's limited to a maximum of 10 to prevent the game from becoming too difficult. Game loop. Game loop. This is the heart of the game logic. It clears the canvas, updates the waveform index for scrolling, draws
That the maximum of 10 speed is actually not there. There's a comment, but there's no code, so I don't know what it's talking about.
draws the waveform on the canvas with appropriate colors based on its type, displays the score, and checks if new waveforms need to be generated based on the scrolling position. Continuous scrolling waveform generation. The game logic ensures continuous scrolling by generating new waveform segments and appending them to the existing waveform when necessary. This keeps the scrolling smooth and avoids abrupt transitions. Starting the game loop. The game loop is started by calling game loop within the DOM content loaded event listener. This ensures that the game starts running when the HTML document is fully loaded. The comment you provided at the end points out an issue with the logic for checking if the current waveform has completed showing. The corrected logic involves generating new waveforms ahead of time and appending them to the existing waveform array to ensure smooth and continuous scrolling.
Okay, that was the prompt.
Thank you for clarifying the requirement. Based on your description, you're looking to achieve a continuous and smooth scrolling of waveforms across the canvas by dynamically generating new waveform segments and appending them to the existing waveform array. This ensures that there is a seamless transition between the end of the original waveforms and the start of the new ones. This approach prevents any gaps in the scrolling animation. Here's how you can modify the game_logic.js code to achieve the desired continuous scrolling behavior. This modified code, the gameLoop function, now generates new waveform segments and appends them to the existing waveform array whenever the original waveforms are about to finish scrolling across the canvas. This ensures a continuous and smooth scrolling experience for the player. Adjust the number new waveforms variable to determine how many new waveform segments you want to generate and append each time. This value can be adjusted based on your preferences and how long you want the scrolling to be seamless. Remember to test and fine-tune the value of number new waveforms to achieve.
This is good. So in the game loop, this shouldn't. Ba, 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 ba. Yeah, I'll be back in a sec. There's nothing in the chat, no.
The code snippet you've posted is responsible for generating and appending new waveform segments to the existing waveform array. Let's break down what each part of this snippet does. Line sets the variable number new waveforms to the number of new waveform segments you want to generate and append to the existing waveform array. You can adjust this number based on how long you want the seamless scrolling transition to be. For let I equals 0, I number new waveforms, I plus plus, this loop iterates number new waveforms times to generate and append the specified number of new waveforms. Const new waveform type equals generate new waveform segment. This line calls the generate new waveform segment function to create a new waveform segment. The function returns an array containing the waveform data, new waveform, and the type of waveform type, that is either normal or abnormal. Waveform.push, new waveform. This line appends the values of the newly generated waveform segment, new waveform, to the end of the existing waveform array. The spread operator is used to spread the values of new waveform into individual elements. Waveform types.push, array, new waveform.length.fill, waveform type. This line appends the waveform type to the waveform types array for the same number of times as the length of the new waveform segment. This ensures that each element in the new segment gets the appropriate waveform type. By repeating this process for the specified number of times, number new waveforms, you ensure that as the original waveforms are about to finish scrolling across the canvas, new waveform segments are generated and seamlessly appended, maintaining the continuity of the scrolling animation, preventing any gaps. Feel free to Seems like you're encountering an issue where new waveforms are not being generated in time to seamlessly replace the original ones that have finished scrolling. Additionally, you're noticing that the third waveform is the same as the first one. This issue could be related to the timing of waveform generation and appending. To address this issue and ensure a continuous and seamless scrolling experience, you should ensure that new waveforms are generated and added to the array well before the original ones are about to finish scrolling. Here's how you can adjust the code to ensure a smooth transition. This updated code, I've added a loop to check how many new waveforms need to be generated based on the current position of the scrolling. The waveforms to generate value is calculated by considering how many waveforms are left until the end of the scrolling area. If this value is positive, it means there are waveforms that haven't been generated yet, and new ones need to be generated to ensure continuity. By using this approach, you can ensure that new waveforms are generated and added to the array before the original ones are about to finish scrolling, preventing any gaps or repetitions in the scrolling animation. You're encountering a situation where the first set of waveforms finishes scrolling, but the new waveforms haven't been generated yet and the third waveform appears the same as the first one. There could be a timing issue with the generation and appending of the new waveforms. To address this issue, you need to ensure that new waveforms are generated and appended before they are needed for scrolling. One way to achieve this is to generate and append the new waveforms as soon as the game starts to ensure that there are enough waveforms ready for continuous scrolling. Here's how you can modify the code to achieve this. JavaScript. Copy Generating and appending an initial set of waveforms before the game loop starts, you ensure that there are enough waveforms available for scrolling when the game begins. This should prevent the situation where the scrolling resets to the first waveform. Remember to adjust the value of initial number waveforms based on how long you want the initial scrolling to be before new waveforms are generated. This value should be larger than the expected number of waveforms visible on the canvas at a given time to ensure seamless scrolling. With this modification, the game should start with a sufficient number of waveforms for continuous and smooth scrolling.
Simplify the code to just keep generating new waveforms. Simplify the code to just keep generating new waveforms while the current one is being scrolled across the canvas.
You want to simplify the code to keep generating new waveforms while the current one is being scrolled across the canvas. You can remove the logic related to tracking tagged segments and scoring. Here's a simplified version of the game_logic.js code that can remove the logic related to tracking tagged segments and scoring. Here's a simplified version of the game_logic.js code that focuses solely on the continuous generation of waveforms. JavaScript. Simplified version. The code generates new waveforms continuously while the current waveform is being scrolled across the canvas. The initial set of waveforms is generated before the game loop starts, and new waveforms are generated and appended when the scrolling reaches the end of the current waveform. Remember to adjust scroll speed and initial number waveforms based on your preferences and requirements. You can remove the waveform index variable from the code by making use of the fact that you're iterating through the waveform array using a loop that goes from 0 to width. Instead of directly using I as an index, you can calculate the corresponding waveform position based on the current loop index. Here's the modified version of the code where waveform index is removed while keeping all the functionality intact. This block of code is responsible for moving the display of the ECG waveform to the next segment and ensuring that there's a continuous stream of waveforms for scrolling. Let's break it down step by step. JavaScript. Waveform index is being incremented by the value of scroll speed. This step essentially represents the movement of the displayed waveform to the right, simulating the scrolling effect. It determines which segment of the waveform is currently being displayed on the canvas. JavaScript. Copy code. This if statement checks if the waveform index has exceeded the length of the waveform array, indicating that the current displayed segment has scrolled completely across the canvas. If this statement checks if the waveform index has exceeded the length of the waveform array, indicating that the current displayed segment has scrolled completely across the canvas. Yes, those two lines are conflicting with each other. Let's clarify their roles. Const waveform index equals math.floor x slash width slash waveform.length. This line calculates the waveform index based on the user's click position x. It determines which segment of the waveform the user clicked on by dividing the click position by the width of the canvas, width, and then finding the corresponding index within the waveform array. Since it's defined with const, this value is set and doesn't change within the scope it's defined. Let waveform index equals 0. This line initializes the waveform index variable with an initial value of 0. It's likely that this line was intended to be part of the loop structure inside the game loop function to iterate through the waveform segments as the simulation scrolls. However, it seems redundant and potentially conflicting if you're also using the waveform index calculated from the user's click position. Line initializes the waveform index variable with an initial value of 0. It's likely that this line was intended to be part of the loop structure inside the game loop function to iterate through the waveform segments as the simulation scrolls. However, it seems redundant and potentially conflicting if you're also using the waveform index calculated from the user's click position. JavaScript, you cannot have two variables with the same name within the same scope. Since these two lines are both within the same scope, the DOM content loaded event handler function, having both of these lines would result in a conflict. The variable name waveform index cannot be declared twice. It seems like you might have pasted these lines from different parts of your code, and they were intended to serve different purposes. If you want to track the user's click position within the waveform, you should use the first line. If you need to iterate through the waveform segments within the game loop function, you should use the second line. Here's how you can resolve the conflict. User's click position within waveform. Use the first line to calculate the waveform index based on the user's click position. JavaScript. Use the second line within the game loop function to keep track of the current segment being displayed and scrolled. JavaScript. By keeping these two uses of waveform index separate, you can avoid conflicts and achieve the intended functionality for both scenarios. The code you provided seems to be in good shape, and it should work based on the context you provided. It initializes canvas, sets up game variables, generates waveforms, handles user input, and implements the main game loop for scrolling and displaying the ECG waveforms. However, here are a few points to consider. Waveform scrolling logic. The logic you've implemented for scrolling the waveforms based on the scroll speed seems appropriate. Just keep in mind that it's set to scroll forward by scroll speed segments per frame. This may result in abrupt movement if the scroll speed is too high. Waveform generation. The initial generation of two waveforms is a good start, and you're adding new waveforms when the current ones are about halfway across the canvas. This ensures that there's a seamless transition between the waveforms. You might need to fine-tune the timing of when new waveforms are added to achieve the desired gameplay experience. User interaction. The click event handling appears to be correctly implemented, allowing players to tag abnormal segments and accumulate score. Display and rendering. The code seems to be drawing the ECG waveform on the canvas correctly based on the waveform data and rendering the tagged segments in red. Score update. The score is updated based on the user's interactions with the ECG waveforms. The code seems to be drawing the ECG waveform on the canvas correctly based on the waveform data and rendering the tagged segments in red. Score update. The score is updated based on the user's interactions with the ECG waveforms. Waveform length and continuity. Make sure that the waveform length and continuity are appropriate. If the waveforms are too short, the scrolling might feel too fast. If they're too long, the scrolling might appear sluggish. Canvas clearing. Clearing the canvas using ctx.clearRect at the beginning of the game loop ensures that the canvas is cleared before drawing the updated waveform. Score display. You might need to uncomment the line to display the score using scoredisplay.textContent if it's not displayed as intended. Stop generating. Default, GPT. Code you provided appears to handle user interaction correctly. Here's a breakdown of what's happening within the click event listener. Const x equals event.clientx, canvas.getBoundingClientRect.left. This line calculates the horizontal position of the click within the canvas by subtracting the left offset of the canvas from the clientx value of the click event. Const y equals event.clientY, canvas.getBoundingClientRect.top. Similarly, this line calculates the vertical position of the click within the canvas by subtracting the top offset of the canvas from the client y value of the click event. Const waveform index equals math.floor, x/width/waveform.length. This line calculates the index of the clicked waveform segment based on the click's x coordinate. It divides the click's x coordinate by the width of each waveform segment to determine which segment was clicked. The subsequent if-else conditions are handling the tagging of waveform segments based on user interaction. If the click segment is abnormal and not already tagged, it's tagged as abnormal and the score is increased. If the click segment is normal, the score is decreased. The final conditional statement is changing the color of the waveform segment to red if it's tagged as abnormal or previously tagged as abnormal. This change in color helps players visually identify which segments have been tagged. Overall, see, if the section of code you provided isn't working as expected, let's break down the issue and try to identify the problem. It appears that the issue might be related to how the user's click position is being converted into a waveform index. Here are a few troubleshooting steps you can follow. Console logging. Add some console.log statements within the click event listener to debug and see the values of x, waveform.length, and waveform index. Double check that the dimensions of the canvas, width and height, are accurate and match the actual dimensions of the canvas on the page. Waveform segments. Ensure that the waveform segments are evenly spaced and cover the full width of the canvas. If they're not spaced correctly, or if the segments don't span the entire width, it could lead to incorrect index calculations. Ensure that the waveform segments are evenly spaced and cover the full width of the canvas. If the While the code you provided is already quite concise, we can simplify it a bit further by removing some redundant checks and reducing the number of conditional statements. Here's a simple clicking on the waveform segment and the segment waveform type are misaligned, it could be due to the calculation of the waveform index. This index should correspond accurately to the position of the click segment in the waveform array. Here's the corrected code for the click event listener to ensure that the tagging and waveform data are aligned correctly.
So this is correct so far. Normal should be getting -10. This is normal again, so I'm getting points reduce. I would expect this to be abnormal wave. Yes, it is. I'm getting extra points. 50 will increase the speed. This is abnormal, it's missing a bit there. Is this normal? So I'm getting points down. A bit finicky. We're getting points up here. This is normal, should be getting points down. So still the score still not working correctly. How do we add an option to only click on each waveform once? Let's pop this in, making some progress.
Clicking on the same waveform segment multiple times, you can keep track of which segments have already been clicked using a set or an array. Here's how you can modify the click event listener to achieve this.
I thought we were already doing that. Checking the segments not being clicked before. Should be changing the color. This is abnormal. just wrong. Okay, obviously we need to keep troubleshooting some things, but let's quickly publish this on the website. We'll have it as unlisted. So I forgot to turn my camera on. Microphone's okay. Have to keep checking the OBS thing. We also check the YouTube Studio. Yeah, it was giving me wrong stats. We're going for 3 hours already. Might take a break and get back to it later. Hopefully, it will be on the website as well. Let's pop it on the website and we'll finish up. So, see you in the next bit. And just keep going quickly. Quickly pop it on this side. The code is on GitHub as well. Might as well just put it on the site as well. No, in the wrong folder. It was called Cardio Quest. Cardio Quest. Pop it in here. And in theory, when you go Bionic Chaos and Cardio Quest, you should see the game. So if you're listening to If you're listening to my live streams, you should be able to find the link. Yes, normal, that's correct. The score is going down. This would I expect this to be abnormal. No, it's still normal. Yes, the score is going down. Goes negative as well. Probably shouldn't go negative, should stay at 0. That's normal. That's abnormal. It seemed to be the idea is that yeah, to scroll through as soon as you see anything abnormal, you click. There's something wrong with the clicks. It seems that the label of the waveform and the waveform itself are not aligned, because when I click on abnormal, the score doesn't always go up.
Misalignment issue you're facing could be related to the calculation of the waveform index and the synchronization between the waveform rendering and the tagging logic. It's important that the waveform index accurately corresponds to the position of the click segment in the waveform data. Given the complexity of the interaction and the specific behavior you're describing, it might require a closer look at the entire codebase to identify the root cause. There could be issues related to how the waveform index is calculated, how the waveform is drawn, how the tagging is being tracked, or how the score is updated. Here are a few steps you can consider taking to troubleshoot the issue. Debugging output. Add debugging output to various parts of your code to track the values of variables such as waveform index, tagged, and score as you interact with the game. This can help you identify when and why the misalignment occurs. Canvas synchronization. Make sure that the canvas rendering and the click event logic are properly synchronized. For instance, check if the click event listener is interacting with the correct segment of the waveform and if the tagged segments are being properly tracked. Check the
It's this bit.
Make sure focus on ensuring that the canvas rendering and the click event logic are synchronized correctly. This involves making sure that the click event listener is interacting with the correct segment of the waveform and that the tagged segments are being properly tracked. Here are some steps to help ensure proper synchronization. Verify waveform rendering. Double-check the code that draws the waveform on the canvas. Ensure that it accurately corresponds to the data in the waveform array and that the waveform is being drawn at the correct position. Review waveform index calculation. Check the calculation of the waveform index within the click event listener. Make sure it accurately maps the click position to the correct waveform segment. Check tagging logic. Review the tagging logic in the click event listener. Ensure that the tagging and score incrementing are happening only for the correct abnormal segments and that the tagged segments are being tracked properly. Consider adding debugging output. Temporarily add console log statements with
the normal coming. That's correct. Next is normal. So I think it goes by this and not by what is displayed on the screen. The colors are also not correct. The time of daytime seems to be wrong. Oh, yeah, next one is normal, is it? No. Describe the game in a paragraph, including detailed rules.
ECG waveform game is an interactive challenge that tests your ability to identify abnormal electrocardiogram (ECG) patterns. In this game, you'll be presented with a continuous scrolling display of ECG waveforms on a canvas. Your task is to carefully observe the scrolling ECG patterns and quickly identify abnormal segments. Abnormal segments can include variations in the QRS complex, missing P waves, absent S waves, or no T waves. Normal segments will also be present. To tag an abnormal segment, click on it when it aligns with the cursor. However, be cautious not to click on normal segments, as this will result in a score deduction. Your score increases when you accurately tag an abnormal segment, but decreases when you mistakenly tag a normal segment. As you accumulate points, the speed of the scrolling waveforms will adjust, making the game progressively more challenging. Keep an eye on the score display to track your progress and aim for the highest score possible. Game rules. Identify and click on abnormal ECG waveform segments as they scroll across the canvas. Avoid clicking on normal ECG waveform segments to prevent score deductions. Clicking on an abnormal segment earns you points, while clicking on a normal segment reduces points. The game speed increases as your score goes up, making it more challenging. Continuously monitor the score display to track your current score. The game ends when you decide to stop or when you reach a specified score goal. Aim to achieve the highest score and demonstrate your skill in recognizing abnormal ECG patterns.
Turn this into HTML text. This doesn't have a name. How to this canvas seems to be different from the one in index.html file. Modify my thing without.
Right, the code you provided initializes a new canvas element dynamically in the JavaScript code. This canvas is different from the one in the HTML file because it's being created and appended to the document.body element programmatically. This approach can be used if you want to generate and manage the canvas entirely through JavaScript. If you want to use the canvas element that's defined in the HTML file, canvas ID equals game canvas, width equals 800, height equals 600/canvas, you should reference it in your JavaScript code by using its ID attribute.
Go in here, const canvas. Okay, don't need that. We corrected this. This instructions be aren't the instructions meant to be after the canvas? They appear on top of the canvas. No, they appear first. The instructions appear those in this same arrangement.
The instructions are still appearing above the canvas even with the arrangement you've provided. It's possible that there might be some CSS styling affecting the positioning. To ensure that the instructions appear below the canvas, you can add some CSS to explicitly control the layout. Here's an example.
do have a CSS, do we? No, we don't. No, that doesn't work. Well, eventually they're starting to be the same as on the website. Okay, we'll just continue later. Progress was really slow today, but luckily the thing is up and running on the site. Should be able to share it soon. But if you watch this, you can try it already. I'll see you in the next one.